So, in the intro to Banjo-Tooie, the characters are playing poker, and one of the first comments is that Mumbo has all of the money, or he has most of the gold, and so Kazooie takes the opportunity to lie, saying that Grunty has come back, and then Grunty actually has come back. So there's a sort of like fairy tale moral in this, in a sense, where the lie that Kazooie tells is the appearance of Grunty, as if this evil within oneself that makes one lie or hurt and cheat others is what Grunty represents. Then Mumbo goes out, sees that it's true, comes back, says the same sentence again. Now this time Bottles doesn't believe it, and because of this he dies. Thing is, Bottles here is presented with the same sentence twice. It's as if the same fact has been divided into two, and once it was a lie and another time it was truth. In Banjo-Kazooie, Bottles is also confronted with a misinterpretation. He sees Grunty, but he thinks it's not Grunty. He thinks it's Banjo. In the same way that in Banjo-Tooie, Grunty appears, but he thinks it's not Grunty, that it's a lie. And this gets attributed to his, in Banjo-Kazooie, to his short-sightedness. That his vision is blurry, so he doesn't see Grunty. He sees Banjo. Now, in the same way that Grunty conceptually gets split into two by the lie, by the dishonesty, that very dishonesty is also the acquisition of Mumbo's money by Kazooie. To top it off, Grunty herself is surrounded by two sisters, whereas in the first game she had one. Again, as if a split in herself has happened. Her body has been turned into two sisters, and what remains of her is the skeleton, the core. Funnily enough, only one person sees the skeletal Grunty re-emerging from the dead, and that's Mumbo, who gets called a skeleton by the sisters. So the skeleton sees the skeleton as if they are looking at each other as reflections through a mirror. It's as if the moment when Mumbo sees Grunty is a moment of self-reflection, and that therefore it would make sense that it would be Mumbo who sees this, since he is the shaman. It's as if what he is seeing is a vision more than a literal event. In fact, Kazooie makes direct reference to Grunty being split into two by asking if now she has two heads, which she has in the form of the two sisters. Now, why does Kazooie want money? Banjo seems to shy away from this desire, but Kazooie embraces it, and it seems to be for her birdseed, so food. She wants the money as a sort of life force. And since it is Kazooie who brings Grunty back to life conceptually by invoking her, then Grunty's own wish echoes Kazooie's. Grunty also needs life energy to feed on, to bring herself back to life. And I find it interesting that Mumbo Jumbo is the main owner of all this money, because in the Mayan temple the whole area is decorated with skulls resembling Mumbo's face, and the music features these sort of low-pitched chants that also sound like Mumbo's voice. And of course the main temple is home to a giant treasure of gold. So it's not just that Mumbo has gold during the poker game, it's almost as if the poker game in this sense is symbolic of the gold that is stored in the skeleton archetype, in the skull shaman archetype. Now, being a shaman, Mumbo is one of the characters in the game who is clearly magical, has magical energy in him. So again, in a sort of dream interpretation logic, magic is libido, it is life, energy in this sense. So again, it makes sense that he would be the one who has all of the libido, all of the money, and Kazooie needs some of that for herself. Bottles, on the other hand, lives underground. He's a mole, right? Kazooie lives in the sky, she's a bird. Bottles lives underground, just as Grunty. Grunty, for the last 2 years, has been living underground, under a rock. And the sisters also come to greet her by erupting out of a hole in the ground with a machine. It's as if, archetypally, the mole, as a creature who comes out from the depths, is the situation that it is being lived through. And since the underground, again in a psychological sense, is often literally the underworld of death, it makes sense that Bottles doesn't just live in the underground, Bottles is dead, as we discover. Or as if Bottles' death in this game isn't so much an event, but a realization. He already was dead. Bottles lives in the underworld. He is underground. And what does he need to come back to life? Well, he needs spirit, the same way as Kazooie does. Now the thing is, here an echo appears between his situation and sort of the visual symbolism of Banjo-Kazooie themselves, because Bottles gets divided into two, like Grunty's sisters. He is now a dead body and a spirit. There are two images of him. And the spirit needs to be joined back with the body. Now, Banjo and Kazooie are one character divided into two. You have the bird, usually representative of a spirit in that it flies up in the air, and the bear, an animal who hibernates, lives in, close to the earth, close to caves, more representative of the earth. So the sky and the earth conjoined into one being. And Kazooie, who would be the spirit, or the spirit of Bottles in this analogy, is the one who needs energy from the skeleton in order to come back to life. So funnily enough, if Mumbo and Grunty are somehow images of each other at this level, then beating Grunty is like stealing the money from Mumbo. But at the same time, stealing the money from Mumbo and the dishonesty that is caused by that is what sets the division, the split, into motion. You could say then that in this poker game, the four characters forming a square are equal to each other at different levels. Bottles lives near the earth, like Banjo. Bottles and Banjo would be the same archetype. Mumbo has feathers, red feathers like Kazooie, on his head, signaling also the sort of flight of a spirit, or like a halo, and is a skeleton is undead. So in a sense, Mumbo is already a spirit, symbolically. Is a shaman, is in charge of energy, of magic, therefore of spirit.